I'm here with Marilyn Morningstar, author of The Last Snapshot. Marilyn, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So your new book, The Last Snapshot, recently hit the shelves, so to speak. I understand you're a self-publisher.
Yes, I did decide finally to go ahead with self-publishing versus traditional publishing after 80 or more rejections about 10 years ago. But now it's pretty popular to self-publish and everybody's really accepting that, and Amazon is one of the top three, or if not the top one, publisher in the United States at this point, maybe in the world for all I know.
And we'll get into how you wrote the book and your process. But first, can you tell the listeners a little bit about the book?
Well, The Last Snapshot takes place in Poland pretty much exclusively, although there are some flashbacks into Berlin and how it started with Rena's family. Basically, it's a Jew and an SS officer, but they both have a little bit of interest as far as not being exactly a Jew and not being exactly an SS officer. Shall we just leave it there?
Interesting. So this story is focused on the Holocaust and what the Jews went through, but also with an added twist of this SS officer who, in reality, is not committed to the cause. Is that correct?
That's correct. This first book actually doesn't get into the, quote, Holocaust aspect too much, as in it doesn't cover any of the Treblinka or Auschwitz or anything like that. This one pretty much ends in Warsaw. And the second book does go into Treblinka and some other of the Holocaust aspects of the World War II atrocity.
And it's interesting because you actually wrote multiple books. This book is actually part of a series, and as I understand it, it's the first in the series. So why don't you tell us a little bit about why you chose to do a series, and are these other books contained within The Last Snapshot?
Yeah, no, actually, The Last Snapshot is actually the first in the series of the 5 books, and how that happened was the first book that I ever started when I was 22, I actually was writing a story about some personal experience I had when I was living in Las Vegas, and some personal things that I saw there that I was really astounded by. And it was a completely different book, having nothing to do with World War II and not even having to do with historical fiction at all, actually. But what happened was, when I got back, I took off 20 years to work, and then I got back to it, and I really finished that book and submitted it to Doubleday, and Doubleday accepted it, and then they sent it back to me with a rejection saying, you need to pick your story. That was really depressing because I'd worked on it quite a number of years at that point, and I just decided to break it up. Eventually, I decided to break it up into 5 books, and so I started chronologically with the first story from that book, which was the mother of Julia, and the mother's name was Rena, and that's the character, one of the main 2 characters in The Last Snapshot.
Interesting. So how would you describe your process? And, as I understand it, this book took you quite a long time to write. So how did you progress through your writing process as an author?
Oh, wow, that's a big question. This has been really a lifetime project, I would say. Starting at 22, I wrote for about a year then. I skipped 20 years. I then wrote 3 years. Then I was rejected and went into some other businesses, and then started again. And I worked 8 years actually on Snapshot alone, doing 3 years worth of research, including going to all the sites of the World War, where this book takes place in Warsaw, all over Poland, Treblinka, Auschwitz, and then I also did, hundreds of books of research to get, because my story is actually, it's historical fiction, but it's to the minute. So even though the 2 characters involved are fiction characters, there are fiction characters, but there are real characters that actually existed, and everything that's about those real characters is to the minute. So it's living through the times for the reader, for sure.
Very interesting. So when you finally got around to actually finishing this book, I imagine it was quite a journey trying to get through the publishing. I mean, was it harder than you expected to become a published author?
Oh dear, that's like crazy, crazy stuff. I mean, I did so much to get published when I had put in that last 8 years that I was explaining. I even went to New York, and I went all over New York for like 10 solid days and went to every publisher, and I gave them a copy of the manuscript and tried to get appointments and tried to get looked at and tried to get it published. And all I really got was, we have too many World War II stories being submitted. We prefer nonfiction to fiction. They really wouldn't even look at the story because they were being inundated with World War II stories, which is funny now because they happen to be one of the most popular genres of historical fiction. So eventually I just put it on the shelf, and I left. I went traveling for 10 years, and then I just decided self-publishing is here. Yay, Amazon, let me get this thing done. So I just put it on myself, and without a traditional publisher.
After everything, how does it feel to finally have your book on the shelf in the hands of the readers? I mean, because this journey has been amazing for you.
Yeah, it's been amazing. It's been a lifetime project. I think what I would say is the main thing that's important to me about all this is not actually that I'm published, but actually that the people that are reading it are giving me the feedback that, one, they really are getting inside of the heads of the characters, so they're actually having these experiences. And like I said, excuse me, it's minute to minute, so they are actually, it's a very compelling page turner from what they're telling me, and that's what I thought it would be, since I hired an editor. Was a pace editor from New York, and that was quite expensive. That was 10 years ago, and I had finished it and thought, oh, it'll be published, and it wasn't. But that's the feedback that I'm getting right now, even from readers that I had back then that were helping me, that the speeding up the pace is really great, and the reaction I'm getting is just beyond belief, I've got so many people trying to help me get it into a film, get it into Audible, and that's just a big payoff. And how many books are sold now? Maybe 20, but the people that I'm getting on board with this project just seem like a miracle.
Well, it's certainly an amazing book, and we will be looking forward to some of your other books in your series, and certainly a film. Marilyn Morningstar, author of The Last Snapshot. Marilyn, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the time.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.